Okay, everyone, we're back. And now we're going to be moving on to food webs. So a food web, just to clarify that, a food web is anything, well, it's not anything, I don't know why I said that. A food web is a diagram of in a particular ecosystem or area, what eats what. And this is very important because disruptions in the food web point to something really wrong in the environment. So let's just write our general definition now. A food web. Once again, it is a diagram. I mean, I guess the technical term is diagram of energy flow in the environment, if you want to be precise about it. But really, it's a diagram of what eats what. We use energy flow. I guess that's a nicer term for animals eating animals or animals eating plants. Yeah, I guess it's a nicer term. Unfortunately, is animals are pretty savage in nature. They don't really. There's not really too many ethical debates on the moral quandaries of hunting down a zebra or anything like that. At least not that I know of. Maybe I'm underestimating the animal kingdom. All right, so that is a food web, and it's valuable because it shows us lots of things. It is a relative measure of species diversity, first of all, of species diversity, and also changes in the food web, changes in the food web give hints to changes in the environment. So analyzing a food web is a good way to see what's going on in the environment as far as new species introduced or species that leave or one species becoming overpopulated or one species becoming underpopulated. So it is a good measure of how the environment's changing. I guess you can look at it as food trends in our society is if you have people that suddenly are switching from fast food to more sit-down establishments, that's a clear trend in changes in human activity, changes in the environment. Usually, some scandal where McDonald's gave you E. coli or something. Actually, I take that back. Not to go on another tangent, but when's the last time you've heard of anybody getting food poisoning at McDonald's? It just doesn't happen. I don't think it's happened in years. And McDonald's, for all that we trash them, and you ask any of my former students, and they will tell you that I am a big McDonald's trasher. I have to give them credit where credit is due. No one gets sick at McDonald's. And that is a testament to science, believe it or not. I read up once on how they make chicken nuggets. And you probably have heard that a chicken nugget will never go bad. Now, what makes food go bad? Well, you remember those decomposers we were talking about? Bacteria, fungus, molds. Eventually, if a food is decomposed, is old or has been out for too long, eventually pathogens will get in it, and those, well, not pathogens, microbes will get in it, and they'll start to feast on it in no time flat. Doesn't happen with chicken nuggets, which is weird. So the reason why, in fact, it doesn't happen with any McDonald's food. The reason why is actually fascinating. So when they make their chicken mash, I guess that's the best way I can put it, whatever magic they do to create the inside part of the nugget, they actually run it through, or I should say, irradiate it by passing it through more or less a miniature nuclear reactor. And we know that radiation kills anything. Now, this does not actually harm the integrity, or it doesn't make your chicken nugget radioactive, but strong enough to kill more or less anything that's living in the chicken mash. And then what they do is that they create a quick hydrophobic coating, which is going to keep out anything that is it's pretty much what's going to create a solid seal and airtight seal, so to speak, around it. So they dip it in the batter and then fry it, and you have a chicken nugget that is probably one of the most sterile environments that you can possibly create on planet Earth. Yes, you see that. You see outbreaks of E. coli and things like that in restaurants that are more natural. Unfortunately, um, excuse me. Oh gosh, I almost fought it. All right. Anyway, sorry about that. Yeah, so you see it in companies that are more natural based. Either something happens in the supply line where um, uh, where when they pick the crops is that something happens there, or it's improper storage in the restaurant. McDonald's doesn't have to worry about that because nothing in there is going bad. Yeah, so it's actually a testament to McDonald's engineering. Feels weird saying that. All right, so anyways, we're going to draw a sample food web. And normally what I do is I call on my students to say random plants and animals, but we're not going to do that now because, well, um, I can't call on you guys. So anyways, we're going to put down a layer or a couple of primary producers. So I'm going to make it simple. So we're going to draw here some grass, put down grass. And I'll go ahead and put down, I don't know, apple tree. So this is going to be our primary producers, apples. Okay, now we are going to need a series of primary consumers. Now when we draw an arrow, the arrow goes to the mouth that eats it. So think of the arrow as going into the life form's mouth. So I don't know, for apples, we're going to go ahead and put down, I'll go ahead and put down caterpillar. I'm sure many of you growing up read the book, The Hungry Caterpillar, I think it's called. I don't know, classic book. So here's a caterpillar. Something like that. And we'll also say that what eats the apples, we'll go ahead and make this um, a dual diet because, of course, multiple life forms eat the same food source. We'll go ahead and say the apples are eaten by squirrels. I think that's how you spell squirrel. Part of the rodent family. And as far as the grass goes, let's go big. Let's go big or go home. We're going to have cows. All right, and we'll also go with rabbits. Go ahead and draw a nice hardy rabbit. Looks just like Bugs Bunny. All right. Imagine that thing going in your backyard and staring you in the face. There's I saw something online. It was, what if children's animal drawings were actually real? And I'm telling you, it was one of the funniest things I've seen. So look it up if you want to laugh. All right, so we have our primary producers, primary consumers. Remember that primary consumers are herbivores. And now we need a set of secondary consumers. So we're going to go ahead here, and what's going to eat the squirrel is going to be a coyote. Small little fella. Has to be small and fast to catch the squirrel. And we'll say what eats the caterpillar. We'll say that it's going to be a mouse. It is a caterpillar eating mouse. All right, we'll say what eats the cow. It's got to be something pretty large and in charge. Gosh, gosh, we'll say a lion. This is a very interesting ecosystem. It's Maine. Yes, the king of the jungle, right here. All right, and they'll say this lion is also very hungry, and it's also going to eat the mouse. It's very eclectic lion as far as its dietary preferences go. Now we are going to have a predatory bird. So we'll go ahead and say an eagle, very majestic bird. Eagle, and the eagle is actually going to eat the rabbits. And we'll go ahead just to make things interesting. We'll go ahead and say that I got to label the mouse. Yeah, okay, great. So first of all, let's go ahead and label the different levels of the food web here. And we see that we kind of have two separate paths here, but I'm going to underline anything in black that is a primary producer. And I'm going to highlight anything in dark green that is a primary consumer. And I'm going to highlight anything in red that is a secondary consumer. Gosh, I have to make one more adjustment. So the coyote is a secondary consumer. All right, so this eagle is not joking around. Okay, so a secondary consumer. And now I'm going to underline anything that's a tertiary consumer in blue. Now, if you look here, the lion actually functions as a tertiary consumer as well as the eagle. And we see that because if we count the number of lines here, we see that the grass is a primary producer, the cow is the primary consumer, and in this case, the lion would be the secondary consumer. But let's analyze the mouse. The caterpillar here is the primary consumer, the mouse is the secondary consumer. Therefore, with this path, the lion is the tertiary consumer. Same with the eagle. When it eats the rabbit, it's the secondary consumer. When it eats the coyote, it's a tertiary consumer. I was saying with the trophic levels that that secondary and tertiary consumers, depending on the flow of energy, they can be interchanged between secondary and tertiary, because secondary and tertiary consumers are carnivores. It just depends if the carnivore eats an herbivore or another carnivore. And some people don't realize that caterpillars or insects are primary consumers. So you can have a secondary consumer that is really pretty small in size. All because it is a secondary consumer does not mean that it has to be large and in charge, like our friend the lion. Predatory birds are normally tertiary consumers. Okay, cool. Now, disruptions in the food web. Well, let's go ahead and say that the population of primary consumers, of primary producers goes down. So let's say that we have a decrease in the amount of grass in the population. Well, if that happens, you're going to have a decrease of cows in the population and a decrease of rabbits. Because eagles partially eat rabbits for their diet, you could argue that the eagle population is going to decrease. The reason why is there's now going to be more competition for the remaining food source of coyotes. And how fast can coyotes reproduce? Not super fast. So you can argue that the eagle population is going to go down. Also, the lion population is going to go down as well. Because what's going to happen here is that the lion is going to have to rely exclusively on the mouse. And mice are not exactly the hardiest animal to eat. So the lions will be competing for the mice, and the mouse population will go down. I tend to keep the questions on the exam a little bit easier. So I'll say, for example, which of these will be an effect of grass decreasing in the population. So I'm not going to ask you for super in-depth things. Just know the general idea of what happens if you increase or decrease numbers of a species. Now, normally you can surmise that, okay, well, if lions are relying more on mice for their diets, then you will have the mouse population go down. Oops. So you'll have the mouse population go down. The coyote population will go down. As a result, now the caterpillars have lost their natural predators. So the caterpillar population will go up, and the squirrel population will go up because now there's fewer coyotes and mice to hunt them. As a result, the apple population is going to go down. So you're seeing that the population is going to change dramatically just by decreasing the amounts of just one species in the food web. All right, let's go ahead and have some more fun here. So in case you're wondering, tampering, the lower the trophic level you tamper with, the greater the effects on the food web. Once again, the lower the trophic level you mess with, the greater the effects on the food web. Okay, let's say that we decrease the population of eagles. Okay, let's go ahead and try that. Eagle population goes down. All right, what's going to happen is that the rabbit population is going to go up, and the coyote population is going to go up. As a result, is that you are going to have the squirrel population go down because now you have more coyotes, and you are going to have the apple population go down as well. Actually, now that I look at it, is you can mess with any trophic level. I'm going to have to rethink this. Actually, you can mess with any trophic level and have it be significantly affected. But I do maintain that the effects are definitely greater when the primary producer level is affected mainly. So you definitely want to note that the effects are more extreme. All right, so when the coyote population goes up, then the squirrel population is going to go down, and the apple population is going to go up. Because now not as many apples are being eaten by the squirrels. All right, and also the rabbit population is going to go up, so grass population is going to go down, and you could feasibly see a decrease in the cow population because now cows are not going to have as much food. As a result, the lion population is going to go up or down, sorry, because there's not as many cows in the environment, a great source of food. And since they'll be forced once again to rely on mice, the mouse population will go down. So you're seeing here that the caterpillar population is going to go up significantly because not only do they have more apples to eat, but now they've lost or they've had a significantly decrease in the only animal in the system that hunts them. So you're seeing that the effects are wide ranging. Now we can have further changes too. For example, we can have um, a new species that enters. We'll go ahead and we'll say that we have a new, uh, we have a snake. We'll say. So we're going to put in a snake rattler. Actually, I don't like where this picture is going. We'll do a sidewinder. Once I was having a terrible day at work, and I'm driving home, and I literally was thinking, this day can't get any worse. And I see a snake slithering in the road, and I ran it over, and I'm like, of course that would happen. Of course, a snake would wander in the road, and I would run it over. Of course, it was one of those days where I got home and just locked myself in the room and said I'm not tampering with fate anymore. Okay, and now let's say that this snake has plenty of food in this environment. Let's say that it eats mice. Let's say that it eats cows. Let's say that it eats coyotes. So you're seeing here that this is going to significantly affect. Oh, we'll say squirrels too. This is going to significantly affect the food web in ways that I can't even begin to imagine. Cow population goes down. Lion population is going to go down. Mouse population is going to go way down. The coyote population is going to go down. The squirrel population is going to go up. The eagle population is going to go down. Um, Actually, I take that back. The squirrel population is going to go down as well. And there's going to be a larger population of apples, but then a larger population of caterpillars, and the lion's going to get hurt really bad. Now that I think about it, rabbit population is going to go up, and the eagle population, actually the eagle population, we'll just call that a draw. Now you are probably going to be overwhelmed right now because I've just been drawing a bunch of arrows. That's why I said I'm going to keep the questions pretty um, uh, pretty straightforward. So let's go ahead and do some practice here. All right. So snake goes away now. Bye, snake. All right, so let's say what's going to happen, which of these would be in effect? So let me go ahead and do the text box here. Let me move the text box a bit. So predict the effects of a disease that significantly decreases the apple population. All right, so I'm going to give you a moment to kind of reflect on this, because chances are this is going to be a free response question on the exam. And I'm not going to hold you to identifying everything, but just a general idea of what the effect would be. So go ahead and pause this and give it a couple minutes of thought. And I'm going to assume that you've now paused it, that you've now unpaused it with a clear answer. Well, if the apple population goes down, caterpillar population goes down. If the caterpillar population goes down, then what's going to happen is that the mouse population is going to go down. The mouse population goes down, you can argue that the lion population will decrease a little bit. The lion population decreases a little bit, then the cow population is going to go up. Excuse me. The cow population goes up, the grass population goes down. That means rabbits will have more competition, their population will go down, and the eagle population will go down. Okay. So the easiest way to do this is let's go to each arrow and say, okay, so apples are eaten by caterpillars. Apple population goes down. What's going to happen to the caterpillars? Will they have more or less food? Let's go with this with squirrels now. Once again, squirrel population goes down. Coyotes have less to eat. And now the eagle is going to get big trouble. So whenever you decrease a primary producer, almost every other level is going to get affected significantly. Okay, now let's just change this a bit. What would happen if we removed apples from the population? What if there were no more apples? I'll go ahead and ask you that now. So text box. Predict the effects of apples being eliminated from the population. All right, go ahead and pause this, think. All right, you've now unpaused it. Well, if there's no more apples, there's no more caterpillars. There's no more squirrels. There's going to be no more coyotes. There's going to be no more mice. Because of that, we now only have the grass track, I guess you can say. And the grass track actually is not going to be affected because they don't eat apples. But the lion population is going to go down slightly, and the eagle population is going to go down slightly. So you're seeing the effects of doing things like deforestation on the environment. Because if you literally take away a food source, it's going to affect every other subsequent level that feeds on the apples, or feeds on the animals that eat the apples, or feeds on the animals that eat the apples and the animals that eat the other animal. So you're seeing that it's a cascading effect. All right, I hope you all are doing well on these so far. If not, go back and watch this lecture, please. All right, let's do one more. Predict the effects on the food web if the apple or the grass population doubles. Okay, so now we have a fun one. Grass population is going to increase significantly. Cow population is going to increase. Rabbit population is going to increase. Eagles now have more food. Eagle population increases. Lion population increases. Um, as a result, you could argue that the mouse population is going down. Coyote population is going down because now the thing that eats it has increased in population. Squirrel population is going to go up. Caterpillar population is going to go up. And apple population, we can say, is going to go down. Now, I don't expect this much detail. I would expect to at least see, I'll probably put down as a question, predict 2 effects of the grass population increasing. That way you won't be too overwhelmed. But you do need to know the general impact of increasing or decreasing an animal or a plant in the food web. All right, well, you guys are probably going to need to watch this more than once just because it is rather dense. But now we're going to talk about species relationships. And I do so in a series of graphs just to kind of help you learn it. And the predator-prey graph is one of the most famous in as far as species relationships goes. I did read a book once on, it was a psychology book, and the section on relationships, it started off by saying, relationships do not end, they only change. And I'm like, huh, they're right. So any kind of relationship begins, but it doesn't really end, it changes. I guess you can argue that death will end it. Fortunately, don't like to think that way, but I guess that's kind of true, even though you still remember the person fondly. But in the animal kingdom, species relationships definitely end, especially in predator-prey relationships. So a predator-prey relationship is a unbalanced relationship because one species benefits and the other species is harmed, as you see on the outline. One species benefits, the other species is harmed. And it generally looks like this. If y-axis is going to be population numbers, x-axis is going to be time, it's actually going to have a very distinctive look. So the ideal predator-prey relationship looks like this. We'll say that red is going to be predator, and we'll go ahead and say that blue is going to be prey. Blue is going to be prey. Now, what always happens is that the population of prey is going to increase. Now, as you can see, the population of prey is going to go up because they've gone into a new area or an existing area, and they don't have anything to eat it in significant numbers. Well, eventually the predators are going to catch on that a new significant food source is present, and predators are going to grow in population because now they have a food source. As a result, prey are going to begin to decrease in population because as the predator population goes up, they're going to decrease the number of prey. Well, the predator population is going to continue to go up until they catch on that there isn't enough food, and the predator population is going to go down, either because they leave the area or they die off. Well, with the smaller number of predators, the prey now is going to increase again, and the predator population is going to follow. What's going to happen then is that, once again, the prey population is going to go down, and the predator population lags behind. So you see always that in the prey population, they're always going to increase in numbers first. And that's because there's nothing there to really hunt them. As they grow in population, the predator population is going to catch on, and they are going to move to the area. they're going to have plenty of food, they're going to reproduce and have offspring. But then as the prey population goes down, the predator population, they suddenly find that they have less food. They have to either leave the area or they need to or they die off. But this always lags behind because it takes them up for a little longer to feel the effects. With the predator population significantly decreased or gone, then the prey population is going to go back up. And the cycle is going to repeat. So in this one here, the predators, they are going to benefit, the prey are going to suffer. They are going to be harmed. Think of it like when you shop on the day after Thanksgiving. What happens is that all the companies bring out the junk they've been, all the stuff that all the high quality stuff they want to sell you at a loss. Yes. And what happens is that people get very excited, they camp out. But anyways, let's say in this case that, I don't know, new iPhones are the prey and the predators are the shoppers. What's going to happen is that Target, for example, they're going to roll out their population of iPhones completely unannounced. And a shopper is going to go in and they're going to see the iPhones. And then since we're social animals, they're going to be posting it on Instagram or TikTok or whatever. And all the fellow predators are going to swarm the store and they are going to buy up all the iPhones. Well, more customers are going to show up to the store not knowing the iPhones are gone. They're going to hang out for a bit to see if any more come out. And if they don't, since the prey, the iPhones, are depleted, the predators, the shoppers, are going to leave. With number of shoppers down, the overwhelmed Target staff getting paid minimum wage, they're going to bring up the next wave of iPhones. The fewer shoppers are going to see them, Snapchat or whatever, their friends, and then the predators are going to come back, take up all the iPhones, and then when the iPhones are gone, they're going to hang around for a bit and then leave. Cycle repeats itself. All right, so this is a predator-prey relationship. And now we are going to talk about mutualism. So mutualism is interesting because both species need each other to survive. So both species need each other to survive. And we are going to do a line here. So what we are going to say is that once again, this is going to be population numbers. This is going to be time. We'll go ahead and say that red is species 1 alone. We'll say that it's going to be a dotted line. We'll say that solid line is going to do species 1 with species 2. We'll say that the blue dotted line is going to be species 2 alone. And the solid blue line is going to be species 2 plus species 1. Now, let's say that the numbers start off at the median point. Species 2 by itself is going to have a difficult time surviving. Species 1 by itself is going to have a difficult time surviving. Now, species 1, actually, I just did a solid line when I should have done a dotted line. I'm sorry. All right, so species 1 alone is not going to have a very good time surviving. Species 2 alone is going to not have a very good time surviving. But species 2 with species 1 is going to increase in numbers. And species 1 with species 2 is going to have a similar path. And this is because both species need each other to survive. Probably the best example are flowers and bees. Bees need flowers for pollen. so they can make their food source for the hive. Flowers need bees for pollination so they can continue to propagate their species. So without bees, the flower population will significantly go down. Without flowers, the bee population will significantly go down. Of course, this is simplified, but it teaches a concept. So what's interesting is that bees and flowers in mutualistic relationships, bees and flowers, they've actually evolved together in order to continue the mutualistic relationship. So in this case here, species one is going to benefit, species two is going to benefit. Okay, now the next one is going to be called commensalism. And in commensalism, one species relies on the other for survival. And if we're going to do a graph here again, with Y population being population numbers, all right, we'll go ahead and say species one. Now, it's important to note with commensalism, one species benefits, the other is not affected at all. It's none the wiser. You want an example? There are mites currently on your skin right now, gnawing away at your dead skin flakes. And it doesn't affect you. You don't notice. You're none the wiser. In fact, it cuts down on probably your dandruff. But for the mites, they're actually that's their main food source. They are surviving. So species two, I put a 0 here because species two is not going to be affected in the slightest. But species one is going to benefit quite a bit. So if we're going to do species one alone, it's going to decrease in numbers significantly because it doesn't have a food source. And species two alone, guess what? It's not going to be affected at all. So I'm not going to bother to draw the line. Okay, and next is parasitism. And parasitism is, of course, always negative to the host. So in parasitism, the parasite thrives at the host's expense. So it's kind of messed up, but the parasite's job is to keep the host um, alive as long as possible, so they can continue to live. Several examples of this: bacterial infections, for example. Bacteria have colonized a certain tissue in your body. They're eating whatever that tissue is and dividing every 20 to 25 minutes, and you get significantly affected. You get harmed because the parasite is damaging you. The bacteria is damaging you. Intestinal worms, what they do is they burrow themselves into the walls of your intestines, and they compete with your intestines for food absorption. So they actually absorb the food that you eat, making you malnourished. Believe it or not, about 150 years ago, having parasites was common. It was really not a huge deal. We can't call viruses parasites because they're technically not alive, but viruses, you can argue they have a parasitic relationship, and it's in their best interest to keep the host alive as long as possible. Yeah, intestinal worms, not to jump back, but it's kind of messed up is that some people, they actually purposely ingested intestinal worms because they thought that it would help them lose weight. And well, it did, period. I mean, my attitude would be just eat less food, but who am I? I'm just teacher with a fancy drawing tablet. To each his or her own. Also, there's something called brood parasitism, which is really messed up in a slightly humorous way. But I'm going to show you a video on that to kind of give you a break from my voice. Brood parasitism. Oh, give me 1 second. All right, brood parasitism. As you can see, my my YouTube search history is as exciting as ever. Let's see what they decided to show me. Climber versus gymnast. All right, I'm not either, so I don't know why they're showing me this. Brazil dam, I guess I can understand that. Toxic wastewater, yeah, I can understand that. Politics stuff, I'm not touching in this class. All right, so anyways, we're gonna look up brood parasite birds. Messed up. Let's go ahead and look at this. Oh, let me make sure that I'm sharing with you the audio too. Oh, I was not. Good thing I checked. All right, go nuts.
Turns out there's lots of different birds that don't build a nest at all. They only lay their eggs in other birds' nests. So this behavior is called brood parasitism. And the trick is, you have to make an egg that looks like all the other eggs. Otherwise, the mother bird will kick that egg out of her nest and just raise her young. But if the egg looks exactly like all the other eggs, then she doesn't have any other option than to raise them all as if they were her own. If you don't have a nest, then you can invest a lot of your effort into producing eggs. Cowbirds, for example, which are one of the most common brood parasites in the US, they can lay an egg every single day like a chicken and just put it in a nest here, a nest there. They don't have anything to do with the raising of their offspring at all. They leave that entirely to the mother of the nest where they deposited the egg. The trick with brood parasitism is the chick of the brood parasite will grow much faster than that of the chicks of the actual nest. It gets really big, and its adaptation is to kick. Even before it can open its eyes, it's kicking and just kicks the other eggs out. Even if the other chicks hatch and survive, it's way bigger and its mouth is way bigger. And so when mom comes to feed, she sees this giant target mouth of the brood parasite and all her chicks are buried underneath, but she doesn't know which one is which. In fact, sometimes the brood parasite chick is much, much bigger than the actual mama bird. So she just thinks she has kind of a freak for a kid and just goes with it, I guess.
So I'm going to give you guys a short break, and I am going to return and talk about the next part of our lecture. All right, I'll be back in a moment. All right, and we are back. So we are now going to be moving on to competition. And competition is interesting because competition is not a cut and dry idea. What it is that competition can either be within species or within different species. And competition is, how can I put this in a way that doesn't involve competition? I'll just put several species vie, which means basically to aim for, vie for the same resources, for the same limited resources. Now, as far as competition goes, we have things like habitats, food. If we are going to do interspecies, mates, water, I guess you can say. So what they are doing is that they are all aiming for the same resources, but there's a finite amount. And in competition, we have something called the competition exclusion resources. Sorry, competition exclusion principle. And we'll talk about this first, even though it's last on the outline. Competition exclusion principle. And what this is that species, I mean, this is more or less, the outline has the more, I guess, scientific definitions, but species that do not compete for the same resources, thrive in their environments. Think about it. If you don't have to compete for important things like food and habitat and things like that, then your population numbers will be great, because nothing is competing for their food. To give you an example, koalas, they've actually evolved in order to eat eucalyptus leaves. Now, eucalyptus leaves, they are considered to be rather toxic. But koalas, they've actually evolved enzymes that help to partially break down the toxin so they can solely eat the eucalyptus leaves. They have no competition. They're perfectly happy. The more competition a species has, the lower their numbers are going to be. To give you an example, let's go ahead and do some graphs here. So we're going to have a couple of species. Actually, I'll just do 3. I'll draw a couple of examples. So let's say that we have species 1 alone, and we have species 2 alone, and we have species 3 alone. Actually, we'll do species 1 plus 2. So species 1 alone might have a growth like this. We're assuming that they have plenty of resources. Species 2 alone might have a growth like this. Pretend they're in the same environment. However, species 1 and species 2 might look like this. So we see here that species 2 is going to be the better competitor. You see that their numbers together are lower than their numbers individually, but we see here that in this environment, species 2 is the better competitor. Species 1 is going to have numbers that are going to decrease. Okay, let's go ahead and do an alternative reality here. And we'll say here that species 1 is a great competitor. Species 2 is relatively good at surviving, but together it's going to look like this. So we see that in this case, species 2 is going to be completely wiped out because of species 1 being the significantly more dominant competitor. So once again, you see that both their numbers are down. Species 1's numbers are only down minimally, and eventually species 1 is going to regrow in population. So now we are going to do another example. Wait, why did I erase that? So we can do, for example, species 1 alone is going to look like this. Species 2 alone is going to look like this. And species 1 plus species 2 is going to look like this. So you see here that they're pretty much even competitors. So you see in competition, whenever two species are competing, they're always going to be lower in population numbers than they would be if they were alone. But, and this is a big thing, is that their numbers depend on how strong the other competitor is. For example, let's say you're doing a giant race. Let's say you're doing, I don't know, Moore Park High School versus Simi High School. If you were just to have Moore Park High School race by themselves, then they all would win. They all would place. You'd have first, second, third, and fourth place being Moore Park High School. They'd be very successful at the race. If you do Simi alone, they'll do the same exact thing. Is they'll have the top four Simi athletes will place because there's no one else there to compete. But if you put Moore Park and Simi together in a race, the better competitor will get the most placements. And I know that some of you are from Moore Park and Simi High, so I'm not going to make any predictions with that. We also have a term called an ecological niche, which is a simple term to explain a complex process. And an ecological niche is more or less the role the species plays in the environment. Think about it as your role in the community. So it's things like habitat, food, ecosystem services. So what it does to benefit the ecosystem, for example, how beavers, how their dams are actually considered ecosystems for other species, or trees, how they provide shade, so fungus can grow. Fungus serves as decomposers. So that is generally an ecological niche. All right, so now we're going to move on to ecological succession. And I'm not going to draw this. Instead, I'm going to pull up the PowerPoint because the PowerPoint is actually pretty darn good. So let me find the PowerPoint. Give me one moment. All right, so PowerPoints. I'm actually pretty proud of my PowerPoints. I spent a lot of time making them. But unfortunately, I found, and I actually didn't find this, so I started teaching physiology. But watching a PowerPoint in physiology is like the worst way to learn it. And it's, especially teaching night classes, is I found that students are showing up to class and they're exhausted. They're exhausted because they've worked all day. Totally understand. But if you just sit there and watch the PowerPoint, then it's not the optimal way to learn. So the moment that I started to give outlines and diagram on the board was the moment that students started to um, write down notes and be more active in their learning. And as soon as I made this change, and trust me, it was hard for me since my drawing is at times horrific, as you all probably figured out pretty fast. My exam averages in the class went up by over 10%. So it does work because drawing things makes it easier for you to retain them. Believe me, I don't have a passion for drawing, even though I do have fun with my giraffe islands. But It's for the benefit of the students because if I draw, you draw, and if you draw, you retain better. So anyways, ecological succession is communities are going to change over time to be more and more complex until they can't become more complex. Now we have two types of succession. One is called primary succession, and this starts from absolute zero from the beginning. So primary succession actually takes a long time to complete, because if you want to have plant growth, you are going to have um, soil, and the soil takes a long time to form. So what happens is that you start with bare rock, and bare rock eventually is going to be weathered over time by water. So it's going to become crumbly. And where there's rock and water, you have mosses form. Mosses and lichens. Now, mosses and lichens are very primitive plants that don't require soil to grow. They just require water. But over time, these moss and lichens are going to die. And as they do so, they're going to mix with the dirt and become soil, because soil is half decomposing matter and half dirt. Because of that, you are going to have very simple plants begin to populate the area because there's not much soil, not much room for growth of plants. But as time goes on and the soil becomes more and more rich, is you are going to have more and more diverse plant life, because you're seeing that the soil quantities are going to increase over time. Because the more plants die, the more rich the soil gets, and the more complex plant life is able to form. So you are going to start from flowers to bushes to small trees to bigger trees. And the reason why this replacement happens is because larger plants grow deeper roots and now compete these smaller plants for soil nutrients. Plus, and these are plants being savage, is taller trees, they actually prevent smaller plants from getting sunlight, thus starving them from energy. Now, as soon as the community is as complex as possible, meaning no more complex plant life can develop, we call that a climax community. And this is going to be an area that's relatively unchanging because you can't get any more complex plant life. It's already as complex as possible. Now, secondary succession, this happens when the community already has ample soil. So this last stage here where you see the trees, the soil is already present, but a disaster like a volcano can destroy all the plant life on the surface. However, in secondary succession, plants restore quickly because the soil is already there. However, it is important to note that the plant life that settles will be different. It's not going to be the same plant life. So that's why in human activities, whenever we do things like deforestation or man-made caused fires, is the plants that repopulate the area are going to be different than the ones that were there before the disaster. So primary succession starts from the very beginning, just rocks, and secondary succession occurs when the soil is already there. The difference, though, is that the plants are gone. And here you have a pretty good flow chart or comparison of primary and secondary succession. So make sure you pause this and take a look at this so you have an idea on how each one works. All right, well, I hope you all enjoyed this lecture. I know it was rather long, but I hope you all learned a lot. And yeah, I'll see you all soon. Over and out.